listening to Orange Pulp with a guest fill-in because Tim had to be sick and then had to take care of his parents. Both of those things, I don't know how either of those connect, but yes. So now he's getting parental care. My question is, with Tim being out and helping with his parents, is he helping his parents, but since he's sick, or is his parents helping him? That's just a side note. Filling in for him, we have Nicholas, more commonly known as Nick, and obviously we have Zachary, more commonly known as Zach.
Thank you.
And I'm Brian. So my name just doesn't shorten like that. So
I wish that it did.
I mean, I guess Bry, but really the only person who refers to me as Bry is Lindsay. So
yeah, she is.
Yeah, she is the only person, and then the only person who ever referred to my last name in a shorter name was one of my bosses at ESPN who took Armstrong to Army.
So Nick, how's it going?
Pretty great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thank you for helping us fill in with Tim.
We are officially over a minute in, and we haven't talked anything other than nonsense, so we're right on track.
Perfect.
Syracuse football.
Let's do it.
Losing to Virginia. Nick, since you're the guest, we'll let you go first. What?
Okay, I don't think this was as bad as the South Florida loss. Triple overtime. Obviously, a game could have gone a lot of different ways. Virginia, yeah, their only win came against William & Mary. They played some tough teams to start the year. But, yeah, the Orange defense has looked real shaky of late. I don't know what the solution is. Scott Schaefer's certainly going to address it. Obviously, the offense can put up some points when they need to, but against a maybe subpar Virginia team, not the effort they were looking for.
You said not as bad as the USF game. Couldn't I argue it's worse because they were clearly dominating the game and then just let it get away?
From a heartbreak standpoint, I guess, I think by the level of play that they displayed, that's kind of what I was referring to. Obviously, because it's a conference game, it's much more detrimental to their chances at a bowl game. I think this is a game they can move forward to from. I'm not saying that that's going to lead to a win next week against Pittsburgh, but as far as what they showed on the field, a little more to take comfort in from the South Florida game. But you're right, it's a triple overtime loss against a conference opponent on the road for a young team. It's going to have a negative effect in certain ways.
Zach, they are no longer undefeated in the ACC. For those
AAC.
For those who get the joke, get it. For those who don't, it's just one of those we had to have it thrown in there. Triple overtime loss. What do you make of it?
I make of it that it was unlucky. Because, watching the game, you said it perfectly. It could have gone a number of ways. Syracuse really sort of dominated it in certain aspects. But then any time that the game goes to overtime, especially in college football with those rules, it's one of those things. It's kind of, if you have the ball first, you almost have to score a touchdown because you don't want to kick the field goal and then the other team comes in and scores the touchdown, and you're like, well, if we'd gone for it, then it looks bad on me. But then if the other team misses out, really it all comes down to luck in overtime.
College football overtime is an interesting, weird way of doing the game. It's almost like the shootout in hockey or penalty kicks in soccer. It's not the game, but it's a different semblance of it.
I almost like it a little bit better than the NFL overtime.
I strangely do too, even though I know it's not as close to the game as we can possibly get.
Because I think that it's so much more interesting. Because you're not like, oh well, they can kick, they can punt, because they already start in field goal range. So I mean, if the team really wanted to, they could go up the first play of overtime and kick the field goal, and then say, you know what, you got to score points now.
Now with Syracuse on back-to-back losses, straight away game losses, can Cuse be bowl eligible?
Well, I think Pittsburgh is a winnable game, and I hate to call it a must-win game, but for their bowl chances, there's how many X number of bowls, like 75 bowls or something like that. But to get into a bowl game, they're going to need to start picking it up in the conference slate with their toughest game still ahead, Clemson, Florida State. Pittsburgh's a game they have to take care of business. If you asked me today, I would say Syracuse is on the outside looking in for the bowl season. But this is a young team. Young teams usually don't know when they're not supposed to be good. Maybe they have some surprises in store for us, but maybe a year away for Syracuse if you're looking at getting back into the bowl picture.
If you're just tuning in, I don't know why you would be on a YouTube, but just if you are, it's the whole practice for radio is what we get told. So you're listening to Orange Pulp. Nick, that voice you just heard, is filling in for Tim as he's sick. Hope he gets better.
Feel better, Tim.
With Zach and myself. Like you said, you'd hate to say this early it's a must-win game because, well, every game in college football, if you want to go for a title, is must-win. Or is it? That's the question with playoffs that we'll get into a little bit later with the preview of our top four and what our projections are. But you got to win 6 games. They're halfway there, but can they get the other half?
I mean, they jumped out to those first 3 wins so quickly, starting out 3-0 for the first time since 1991, first time in my lifetime.
I was born in 1991, so yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to say that the Orange will be able to get those remaining 3 wins, but I'm looking at the rest of their schedule. I'm not sure that they can. They've got, I think that probably their best chances for victories are against Pittsburgh. It is homecoming. And then the last week of the season against Boston College. That's only 2. That's only 5 wins. I think the rest of the way, they're going to have to pull an upset somewhere.
Well, maybe Clemson will Clemsoning.
Well,
don't tell Dabo. Don't tell Dabo Swinney. He will lose it. Just don't utter that word in his presence.
Zach had went off on that last week, and it was very entertaining to hear him channel Dabo's expression.
Yes.
One thing did come out of the game: Dungy in a Sports Center highlight.
It was incredible,
leaping over a defender. And a 6'3" safety at that got up. I know he's running and he's down a little bit because that's how you make a tackle, but it was fantastic. Then goes into the end zone for a touchdown. It just showed the athleticism of Dungy.
I mean, from your quarterback, that's exactly what you want to see. You want to see him to be able to make those plays. You don't want him to have to make those plays, but you want to be able to say, you know what, if we get into a mess, we've got Dungy back there to bail us out, and I mean, like that showed just how competent of a runner he is, and I mean mix that in with his arm. He could be a really dangerous quarterback in the future.
He could be just a freshman filling in for obviously all injuries all over. Hunt getting the start to begin with, and then his knee went out again, and it's just injury after injury. Achilles says sorry. Was knee last year?
Leg.
So
lower body injury.
Lower body. We're gonna NHL it. We're gonna NHL it. So just the weirdness of injuries and unfortunate and the concussion protocol. Now, not a rant on concussions, but just an update on one of the players for Syracuse can't play. Go on
AJ
about
Long.
that.
Yeah, AJ Long. He suffered his 3rd concussion in like 2 years. You know, that's just a dangerous hill to be trying to climb. Concussions are such a big thing now, Brian. We all know your take on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that road. It's not worth it, but I felt it did bear mentioning because it's in such a short period of time. Now, past the Syracuse route, moving on, we know they play Pitt next week. What are your projections against Pitt?
Pitt's got some good playmakers. They got a real nice offense there. If you're looking at the tiers of college football, I think Pittsburgh and Syracuse kind of fall into that tier. Maybe in the 50 to 60 range if you're looking national rankings. Syracuse obviously maybe a little lower than that. It's a home game, so that'll be good for Syracuse. Get them back, get them in a familiar environment.
I think that's exactly what they need right now.
I do too. I think against a conference opponent in a game that they really need to take care of business, I'll give Syracuse a slight edge. I don't think it'll be 4 losses in a row because if there's a loss next week, there's already starting to be whispers. There were whispers before the season of Scott Schaefer being on the hot seat. I think a loss next week is really going to start those rumors up in earnest.
Zach, your pick on the game?
I'm going to go with Syracuse in this game because I think like Nick said, them coming back and playing in the Carrier Dome with raucous is that a good way to describe the Carrier Dome?
Depends. I mean, you get the on the stage on this
enthused.
So you get
enthused.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're never going to get the same atmosphere as, well, I shouldn't say never, but you don't get the same atmosphere as a college basketball game, but
Right.
you do get some sound inside the Carrier Dome with it being closed in.
Yeah. So I'm going to say I'm going to give the edge to Syracuse next week. I think that they will be able to pull out a victory against a former Big East opponent. Of course, South Florida, former Big East foe, and we saw how that went.
I don't think that affected the outcome of the game, the fact that they were a former Big East opponent, but it's nice to bring back in the history.
From the ACC/former Big East to the Big Ten, the Little Brother Bowl.
That was a fantastic name. When I read that on the rundown, Brian, I laughed.
I'm glad that something that I put on the rundown actually entertains people.
Coined by Mike Hart.
Yes.
Syracuse native, former Michigan great.
Don't tell the people in Onondaga that it's a Syracuse native. Because that's it's an outside of Syracuse, but yes.
Central New York.
I don't think his rushing total will probably ever be broken on that in high school, being a small school, and that's just a side note of how great Hart was in high school and in college, and had a little run for the Colts, but nothing crazy. But I have to be honest, I watched almost that entire game. The key word being almost.
Please tell me you turned it off.
When Michigan State turned it over on 4th down, I just did the channel switch to go check out other games to get updates on other things, see what else is going on. And how I found out about the play was Twitter exploded. And let me be honest, the first 3 quarters and the first 5 minutes of the 4th quarter was like watching paint dry. That game was not entertaining. And then it became entertaining in the 4th quarter, and then watching the highlight time and time and time again. What a crazy ending. So, Nick, what?
I picked Michigan State to win before the game. That pick wasn't looking great for a while. And you're right. I was not watching this game. I, too, saw the Twitter explosion that was my personal favorite reaction, former Spartan Le'Veon Bell losing his mind.
Le'Veon Bell looked like a little kid that just got given a cookie after he got told he couldn't have a cookie.
I think that's putting it mildly. I mean, it looks like they gave him the whole bag.
So, Zach, what do you take? I mean, college punter Blake O'Neal, who none of us would have ever known his name, 80-yard punt earlier in the game. Yes,
that's incredible.
80 yards. But he'll never be
he?
remembered for that.
Good Lord, where was he standing to kick it that far? Was he at the back of the end zone?
Not quite, but pretty close. And then it was one of the. He's a rugby-style kicker, so it did one of those. It bounced, and just kept rolling. So, but he's never going to be remembered for that. He's going to be remembered for the guy who couldn't handle the snap, couldn't just jump on the ball, and with such a short time, Jalen Watt Jackson returned it. And if you knew who he was, good for you. And you probably saw the last play of the season because of his hip being dislocated. What was your emotion when you just heard that he's no longer going to be playing?
It was one of those things I was like, wow, what an incredible way to go out. Because, I mean, like, that's one of those things that you're just like, well, let's draw this up and hope that something good happens. And well, I mean, okay, I take that back, because that's not one of those plays that you do draw up. It's instinct. Instinct takes over, and it's just, you go. And this coming from a former non-athlete, current non-athlete. But I mean, like, I know enough that's one of those plays that it's not planned anywhere. And I mean, obviously, it took a very, very lucky Michigan State bounce.
Now, we're caught up in today's day of society of everything we see right now is the greatest thing we've ever seen, which, I'm sorry, we're not that lucky. We're not lucky that anything we witness live just happens to be the greatest thing of all time. But having said that, how does that stack up in game-ending plays? I mean, in my generation, I instantly think of the Auburn game a few years ago. Where does this stack for you personally?
Well, you've also got to think about the Doug Flutie Hail Mary.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously not our generation, but...
Pause on the Doug Flutie. We'll come back to that, but because there is a fun story with that for me.
For Michigan fans, I think this has got to equate to the Cordell Stewart Hail Mary that won the game for Colorado back in 94, 95. But, yeah, I think this is slightly behind the Iron Bowl from a couple years back as far as crazy finishes. And recent history, definitely it's up there. I do want to say, actually the second time this season that arguably a punter has made it cost a mistake. Texas lost a game earlier this year when their punter muffed a handoff. But I think we need to ease off the punter a little bit. Punters don't lose you ball games. I remember back in the NFL, Tom Coughlin lost it on his punter when Deshaun Jackson had a game-winning return for a touchdown. That's ridiculous. It's not the punter's fault that they lost the game. It's a one-score ball game.
The punter was not the one that was expected to make the tackle on that return.
No, but there's a big difference between that being returned and not being able to hold it. Now, he's still a college athlete, so giving less criticism towards it's his job. But it's not like he was expected to make the tackle. It was he was supposed to hold on to the ball and then kick it. Or if you can't get the ball, just fall down. That had to be a conversation. But where does it rank for you?
I'm kind of like Nick. I think that I'm going to rank the Iron Bowl above that one. But, within the last 10, 15 years, definitely, if I'm going to rank the Iron Bowl number one, it's probably going to be about 1A.
So, for the fun story of Doug Flutie's Hail Mary.
Best finish in college football history, by the way.
Obviously, I was not alive for that. However, there was a fun story. I had a very strict curfew that my parents always enforced. However, the replay of the condensed version of that game was on. So the condensed where they combined a whole game into 2 hours, I think is what it was, or 90 minutes, something to that effect. And Dad kept wanting me to see the play. So he kept pushing it. It started at the same time my curfew, or my bedtime was, for lack of a better word. And he kept pushing it back, saying, "Oh, it'll be coming up shortly. Oh, it'll be coming up shortly. Oh, it'll be coming up shortly." An hour and a half later is when I actually got to see the play and then got to go to bed. So that was one of those things. And as I watched all of the Michigan game, except for the thing, my dad got home from work when it happened live and watched 2 plays of that game. The play before the Hail Mary and the Hail Mary. So opposite ends on the luck of just, how did I miss that? Now, into another game, the SEC, Bama versus A&M. 41-23, Bama wins, 3 pick-sixes. Derrick Henry had a monster game, but do you attribute it to more of the defense or to more of Henry with the rushing attack?
We're going to get to Leonard Fournette later in the show, and obviously he gets all the attention, but Derrick Henry's a pretty good running back too. He's a man-child, to use the phrase. But 236 yards against a good Texas A&M team. I think Alabama is showing that they are a legitimate playoff contender. They've got the one loss, but I see them as a team that's going to be able to play very well the rest of the way. They got a very good defense, as they always do. Lots of talent on the offensive line, obviously in the backfield with Henry. Texas A&M's got a lot of talent as well. I think next year you're looking at the Aggies as maybe a contender, but the Crimson Tide took care of business for the second year in a row against the Aggies.
Another big game in the SEC, Florida versus LSU, as he talked about. We mentioned Fournette in a bit, but Brandon Harris steps and just has a monster game.
This was actually the game that I was looking forward to most this week.
And it became actually a very interesting game, and you have all the controversy, PEDs, etc. But LSU goes undefeated. So what did you take away from this game?
You look at this and you say, well, if Greer plays, maybe it's a different outcome for Florida. But I think that LSU was... Now, I don't want to say that they were dominant enough. I think that they were the better team overall. But that fake field goal, Holder picks up the ball, throws it to the kicker, bobbles it once, twice, catches it on the third time, and just runs untouched into the end zone. That was an incredible play.
You got to wonder if Les Miles was planning the bobbles when he was thinking of the play. Maybe just have him tip it a couple times to himself. It'll look cooler.
Les Miles is a genius. I wouldn't put that one past him.
Uh-huh.
Leonard Fournette had 180 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns as both Alabama's running back and Fournette had monster games, 2 touchdowns.
Such a bad game for Leonard Fournette.
I know.
Yeah,
only
180. I almost put that in the rundown. I almost put only 180.
That's the point we're at with this guy. It's
So good for Florida to hold him to that.
Yeah.
Comparing Alabama and LSU, which SEC West team do you like more?
LSU, no question about it.
I like Alabama. I think LSU is too reliant on Fournette, and there's going to be a game where he's not going to be able to carry them all the way. I think Nick Saban's got a little bit of an edge over Les Miles in the coaching department, and I think Alabama's really starting to come into their own. LSU's starting to show some weak spots. They've got issues at quarterback, but it's going to be an interesting race, no doubt. I think the SEC representative in the college football playoff is going to come out of the West, whether it's the Tigers or the Crimson Tide.
You're listening
because
to...
anybody that... Sorry, Brian.
Oh, you're good.
Because anybody that thinks that... Anybody that thinks that the SEC is not going to get a representative in the college football playoff, you're wrong.
Is out of their bleeping mind. You're listening to Orange Pulp with Zach, fill in for Tim, with it being Nick and myself. Notre Dame, USC. Now, obviously, we had all the interesting with Sark for new interim head coach, and Sark being relieved and then fired with...
He was put on suspension and then fired.
Yes, so it's one of those weird situations. Notre Dame gets the win, outscoring USC 17-0 in the fourth quarter, which is basically the big thing because USC was winning going into the fourth. Pat Hayden collapsed on the sideline. Maybe he's feeling all the stress of the things and just keeping update with that.
Been a rough couple of weeks for him.
Yes, it has. But how is this for Notre Dame? How big of a game is this for getting a win? And the only loss is in horrible conditions to Clemson by 2 points.
Yeah, I'm high on Notre Dame. I think they've got an outside shot. I think they're a little low in the rankings. Well, they're 14 coming into this game. Obviously, they'll move up a little bit. But they've got a lot of talent. They've had quarterback injuries themselves. They're starting a freshman at the QB spot. C.J. Proces, dark horse Heisman candidate, if he keeps playing well, another one of the very good running backs out there. But yeah, the Irish usually have a very tough schedule, being that they're Notre Dame, but a little easier than most years. So I think they've got a decent chance with one loss, a quality loss, as it were, to get in the conversation there. Really,
Stanford's the only quote-unquote tough game you have, and that's the very last game of the season. Where does Notre Dame stack up for you?
Well, I mean, I think that, first off, I think that Notre Dame is one of the best teams in college football this year.
With all the injuries.
With all of the injuries. Too. If they were healthy, they would at least be getting consideration for the top overall vote in all of the polls. But I think that you have to look at their schedule with them having to play the 5 ACC games so that they're actually in the conference for every other sport. They've only got a limited number of their quote-unquote rivalries left, USC being one of them, Stanford being one of them. So to get kind of an emotional victory over USC like this, so important for that program. Because I think that Brian Kelly has to be able to tell his team, you know, these are the important games. These are the games that our fans have to get a victory out of.
Kelly is such a fantastic coach. Now, Memphis versus Ole Miss. Now, I could have sworn I had the conversation with Nick, but maybe I had the conversation with you, where I hear people telling me, oh, you gotta look at Memphis, sneaky undefeated team. They could beat Ole Miss. And I went, no. Like, just go away. Was it to you?
Yeah, it was me.
Okay,
yeah.
It was to Zach.
Yeah, we definitely had that conversation.
Because I called BS on what he said, saying he predicted. I was like, we had the conversation before. Then I was like, wait, maybe I had it with Zach. So, for the person who did actually pick Memphis over Ole Miss, Nick, go on.
Well, it didn't look great for the Tigers to start out.
14-0.
But then, I think 31 unanswered points. Memphis, you know, the American Conference doesn't get a lot of praise, but they got some good teams. Houston's a top 25 team. But my issue with the reason I picked Memphis was I think going into this game, Memphis should have already been in the top 25. Obviously, they're going to be when the polls come out. And I think Ole Miss was ranked a little high for my taste. I think after they beat Alabama, Ole Miss was way too high. I think
they jumped up to number 3.
Shot up to number 3, which I think that was just a complete overreaction. No doubt, Ole Miss is an extremely talented team. Robert Nkemdiche, going to be probably a top 10 pick. Chad Kelly's a very talented quarterback from my hometown of Buffalo, New York. But the nephew,
well, at least he went somewhere that's warm.
Oh yeah, the nephew of Hall of Fame quarterback Jim Kelly. But Ole Miss, I think they're on talent wise a top 10 team, but that talent is kind of tailed off these past couple weeks. Not at the top tier of SEC teams with the LSUs and the Alabamas of the world. But Memphis, they're going to be an interesting team to watch. That conference schedule obviously is a lot softer than some of these other top teams. So we'll see if they can run the table and if that'll be enough to get them into the upper echelons of the national conversation.
You know, going from one surprisingly undefeated team in Memphis to another in Iowa. Who saw the Hawkeyes? Who saw the Hawkeyes running the table up to this point?
Way to just steal my tagline as I have on my rundown that I sent all of you, the two of them connected right there. Thank you, Zach.
You are welcome. I wanted to see how my host duties were.
I'm okay with it. And from now on, Zach will be host. I will talk to you guys later. So
I knew that I could get rid of Brian some way.
So, as you said, Iowa won 40-10, beating Northwestern. Northwestern, yeah, you had a nice start of the season. Goodbye from the top 25 and relevance, basically. Whoever won this game was going to be in first place for their side of the division, and the rest of their schedule is ridiculously easy. How do you see them running all the way to the Big Ten championship game? Do you think they can go undefeated till that?
I mean, like you said, they've got a ridiculously easy schedule. So I think that the Hawkeyes are a talented enough team to go undefeated the rest of the way and then lose in the Big Ten championship game. Because to be honest, whether it's Ohio State or whether it's Michigan State, they're going to be the Big Ten representative. They're going to be the champion. Just because Iowa to this point they haven't really played anybody.
Wisconsin's down. Northwestern looked like they had something and clearly has lost it. It's not pretty right now.
Yeah. So I mean, like I think the Hawkeyes can run the table the rest of the way.
They picked the right side of the division to be on, and then the year calendar fell correctly for them.
Oh yeah. I mean, like it was a really lucky break schedule wise.
Now, for another team inside the Big Ten, Ohio State, most people's number one right now, haven't looked great, and they played Penn State. Penn State was up 3-0, should have been up 10-0. Now, the hold call that brought the touchdown back by Barkley was a legitimate call, but the hold had zero impact on the rushing touchdown, and then that changed the entire momentum of the game. J.T. Barrett had a huge game, and now Urban Meyer would say he'd look at the quarterback starter. What do you see versus Cardale Jones versus Barrett?
I think we can all agree that J.T. Barrett should be the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes. I think...
Correct.
I think... Cardale Jones kind of had the, if we're going to make an NFL correlation here, the Nick Foles experience, where guy no one had really seen much of, just exploded, put up crazy numbers. And great story last year, Cardale Jones, obviously the main reason the Buckeyes won the national championship. But yesterday, J.T. Barrett responsible for, I think, all of the scoring for the Buckeyes yesterday.
Cardale Jones, just throwing these stats out there. Cardale Jones, 187 yards, 0 touchdowns.
Yeah.
J.T. Barrett, 270 yards, 5 touchdowns.
Exactly.
Now, the touchdowns are a little inflated, not the yard
bit.
side, but the touchdowns are a little inflated because he is the red zone guy.
Yeah.
But it's just look at the two offenses when you're watching the game. The offense looks different. There's a different kind of action. There's a different kind of emotion when he's out in the game as compared to when Cardale Jones is out.
You look at it and you see, well, that's why J.T. Barrett has that C on his chest. That's why he's the captain.
3 years. He's one of the few players to be a 3-year captain for Ohio State.
That's interesting. Wow, that's a nice little nugget to throw out there.
Yeah, just
if you didn't know, now you know.
Yep. Now, we referenced Ohio State as the number one team. I already know for a fact in the top 4 playoffs, Zach does not have Ohio State as the number one team. Maybe after yesterday's games, maybe it changed, but coming into yesterday's games, it did not. So, we'll preview that in a second, but first we're going to go with Nick's top 4 playoff teams.
I had Ohio State yesterday as number 1. That opinion hasn't changed, I think, until they put in an absolutely awful performance or else they lose. I think they're in there at number 1. I'll stick with TCU. TCU, another huge game. I believe they played Iowa State yesterday. Big game there. You got Trevon Boykin, best quarterback in the country, in my opinion. I'll go with Clemson at number 3. In a weaker than usual ACC, I think they're the clear-cut number 1, although Florida State's nipping at their heels. And number 4, I had Michigan State. A little nervous going into yesterday, but, Michigan State miracle. I think that keeps them in my top 4 with, I'll go with LSU outside lurking and Baylor lurking just outside the top 4.
The muffed miracle for Michigan. What do you got, Zach?
Well, I still do have Ohio State in my top 4. But as you alluded to earlier, they are not the number one. They are not the number 1 team in the country to me. The Penn State game, it showed me that they can get it up for a big game like that. But I still say I think that they're going to lose to either Michigan State or Michigan. They do not have an easy schedule the rest of the way, and they still have that opportunity to play for the Big Ten championship. But, they're going to have to play a tough team either way. And you know what? Iowa, they get into the Big Ten championship undefeated. Well, you never know. Maybe miracles do happen.
And they do, but I would be picking heavily favorite on – I'm going to be guessing Ohio State would be heavily favored in that game.
So actually, to just run through my my top 4 real quick, I've got the Baylor Bears at number 1. I think that nobody in the country can stop that offense. They have not had a close game this season. They've scored 60 points in 6 straight games. Ridiculous. They're giving up like 25 points a game. Then I've got LSU at number 2. I think that they will be the SEC representative. I know that Nick thinks a little bit differently. And then I've got Clemson at number 3. I think that they're the clear-cut front runner out of the ACC. Still got that big game against Florida State, though, to really see who's going to come out of the Atlantic Division and take the ACC championship. Because whoever comes out of the Coastal, who knows? And then at number 4, I've got Ohio State.
By 4, I'm going to keep Ohio State number 1 just because of the philosophy I had, same as last year. If you win the national title, return a lot of players, especially in key positions such as quarterback, and you don't lose, I'm not dropping you out of the number 1 spot. The rest of it's fluid, but that 1 spot is yours. Number 2, I have Alabama because I think they will beat LSU.
Wow.
Let's be honest, whoever wins that game is going to jump in all likelihood, but I think Bama wins that game. Number 3, I have Baylor because Baylor's offense is insane and their defense is better than TCU's. TCU's offense is insane, but their defense is like watching a train wreck. It's just horrific.
But TCU has had a lot of close games so far.
Yes, and I even put on the rundown last night when I gave the preliminary, sent it out and saying, right now this game is interesting. Game is tied. Game ended up being very far from tied, so it didn't even bother talking about it. But TCU, Boykin is a beast. There's no question about it. But the defense is just so atrocious. Clemson is my number 4. Now, if Baylor loses, but beats another team such as Oklahoma, but beats TCU, I think Notre Dame jumps into that top 4.
Wow.
But what it has to be is Baylor has to beat TCU or TCU beat Baylor, and then one of those 2 teams lose to another team. So that the one loss, and then because Clemson's in under such huge conditions, and then the 2-point, I say Notre Dame jumps into that scenario.
Now, both of you guys are a little higher on Baylor than I am, and you're correct. They've been playing in blowouts all season. TCU's played in closer games. I'm of the opinion that might help TCU. Baylor's getting a little comfortable winning these games by 40 points. What do you guys think?
I see what you're saying, and I understand that Baylor has a really, really weak out-of-conference schedule. But when you start comparing the 2 teams of how they played against each other and not Baylor versus TCU, and I know you can't do that, we played this team and they played this team, but it's the only comparative we have right now until they play each other. Baylor plays a team, blows them out. TCU plays the same team, and it's a lot of times it's been close. Texas Tech being an iconic example.
You're right. I want to bring in another team into this discussion just to sort of make my point about TCU. Last week, TCU plays Kansas State at Kansas State. They win 45-38, I think it was.
Last second touchdown to Dropson. Doxson. Thank you. I can't even talk.
Oklahoma plays Kansas State at Kansas State yesterday, 55-0. I think TCU's better than Oklahoma. That game could change some opinions about the Sooners, though. Mm-hmm. So,
I think part of it's also coming off that horrific loss to Texas.
I got some grief for listening to Oklahoma as a sleeper a couple weeks back.
I sold you out hard on the show.
Yeah, you did.
They didn't even finish the sentence of one of the people in Orange Game Day Live.
It was Nick.
On Periscope. Picked Nick. It was Nick. I mean, the sentence wasn't even completed, and I was throwing you under the bus hard because I had.
Hey, that was a bad loss. I honestly did not see that coming. But Oklahoma's still a good team. I think they're going to get in a very good bowl game, possibly a New Year's Day bowl. If they do have a tough end of the season schedule.
Yes, they do.
I don't think they'll get through that unscathed. But I stand by my support of Oklahoma. I think they're a very good team, but I don't think obviously anymore a playoff contender.
Yeah. You're listening to Orange Pulp with Nick. That's the voice you just heard, filling in for big time Timmy John and Zach and myself. Now, the National Football League. Today is Sunday, and Sundays were made for football. What game most intrigues you, Zach?
That's a good question.
Is it going to be a little hometown support?
I kind of think so. I'm a big Panthers fan, as some of you might know, and they are playing in Seattle. So I think I'm probably going to go with the Seahawks-Panthers game, just because the Panthers are still undefeated, one of 5 teams left. Yeah, I'm giving the Panthers some love because I love Cam Newton this year. He has really come into a really good quarterback. Brian, I know that you're not Cam Newton's biggest fan.
I'm not, and he has matured, but I'm not a huge fan. There's plenty of people I'd rather have before him, but there's also plenty of people I'd rather have him before. So he's that middle of the road guy for me.
And I've got to say, I really like the Seahawks. Part of that might be because of Russell Wilson, but I really like both of these teams, so I'm not going to be particularly upset over who wins and who loses, but I'm going to give the Panthers a slight edge on the road because they are undefeated and the Seahawks are having a down year.
Talking of that game, here comes a cheesy pun. Sleepless in Seattle. A fire alarm got pulled in the hotel where the Panthers were staying at, I believe it was 5:30 this morning. Of course, I can't find the note where I wrote it down, Pacific time. And they had to go out, and a fire alarm was pulled. The hotel's investigating, making sure was it malicious? Was it someone set it off? But there is no fire at the hotel. But, yeah, that was an interesting way for them to wake up this morning. Nick, what game makes you most excited of today?
Excited? Well, nervous would be my home team.
Nervous as not Buffalo. No.
Just mentioning Bills, Bengals. But I think you got to look at Patriots Colts. I am a avowed Patriots hater, but I don't see any way how they lose this game. I think Tom Brady and the rest of the Patriots are in full FU mode. They're
Gronk mode.
They're on a war path.
God, Brian,
that's a good one. And the Colts have just not looked very impressive this year. This one has the potential to get ugly. I am pulling with all my heart for the Colts to pull off a miracle here. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, that game is going to be some intriguing. And last time these two teams played, the was in a playoff game with some significance, and the Patriots rolled them. And you might have known about some deflated balls or something like that. Now,
first I'm hearing about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't been all over the news for
you
months.
You might have heard about something like that.
Was ESPN talking about it?
Was every company talking about it? I don't think so. I mean, it might have just been a clip on the bottom line, something like that. Now, you pick 5 games. What? We know what it is. You pick 5 games straight up. Going to keep a record over the time, and I did not do an Excel sheet as Tim asked me to do, or Timothy Ferguson, retired high school teacher, as he's known as. Oh, he did not love me for that one in our package day.
Hey, you shortened it to Tim.
I did shorten it to Tim. He said change it. He didn't say what to change. So coming into this week, our first week doing it last week, the perfect 5-0. Me. Tim 4-1, and the lowly Zach at 3-2.
Hey, it's still a winning record.
Yes, it is. So now, Nick, what are your 5 guarantees of this week?
Well, my guarantee of guarantees is Patriots over Colts. I think that's my stone cold mortal lock.
Why is everyone going stone cold lead pipe lock? Like, yes, it's a thing. We don't own right. Tim did it too. I mean, is it because you replaced Tim? You had to channel the inner Tim?
Hey, I don't copy anybody, man. I'm original. I'll go with that one. I'll go with Packers over Chargers. That's a good quarterback matchup. Aaron Rodgers and Phillip Rivers. I'm going to go opposite you, Zach. I'll go Seahawks over Panthers. I will take the Broncos over the Browns. And I will take the Cardinals over the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Zach, who do you got?
Okay. I'm going to play it a little bit smarter this week, I think.
Yeah, you did go a bold prediction. I'm going to pick the Packers.
No, I'm going to pick the Rams over the Packers.
Packers to lose to the Rams. Now, if you would, I would have given you credit for a win had you said it would have been the first time Aaron Rodgers got picked, having thrown 2 interceptions at home. After not, I would have given you credit for that.
I almost said that,
but I even in not picking. But yeah, that's so. Your game picks are
okay. My game picks are: I'm going to go Bengals over the Bills. Cincinnati stays undefeated. I'm gonna also go Broncos over the Browns. That's just an easy win. I'm going to stick with what I said. Panthers over the Seahawks. Panthers move to 5-0. Seattle drops down to 2-4. I'm going to go Colts over Patriots.
Wow.
Yeah. I think the Colts have a lot to play for in that game, and they want to show that they're for real.
I'm rooting for you, buddy.
And I'm going to go. I'm going to say.
He's building the suspense.
Jets over Redskins.
Now, Tim texted me his picks this morning. I messaged him, and I was like, do not delete this. And I just pulled up my phone, and apparently I deleted them. But I think I remember them offhand. Now, this is secondhand information off the top of my head. I know for a fact that he picked the Giants over the Eagles, because my question is, does he just hate Chip Kelly?
Yes, he does.
Yes, we're going to have a conversation on that. I believe he picked the Broncos over the Browns, the Jets over the Redskins, the Cardinals over the Steelers, and the Patriots over the Colts. I believe those were his picks. I'm not 100% sure. We can update them, and we'll send out on our Twitter. Follow us on Orange Pulp 1 on Twitter, or subscribe to us on YouTube at Orange Pulp. Our podcast will be posted there. We can resend that out if that's not correct, but I believe those are the picks for Tim as he's out sick / helping his parents.
I will say those picks make a lot of sense for Tim. So
yes, I believe that's because I looked through it, but of course somehow I deleted it. So my picks for guarantee, once again coming off a 5-0 week, I have to pat myself on the back a little bit.
I hope you're 500 at the end of this week.
It probably will be. Broncos over Browns, Cardinals over Steelers, Packers over Chargers, Dolphins over Titans. This is the game I'm least confident about. But I think with Philman being fired, Dolphins having a bye week, coming back from London, just getting all the preparation, having an extra week, and then the Titans just not being a good football team. And then the Pats over the Colts. Now, we can all go through that. The one game I want to focus in really quickly is the Cardinals over the Steelers. We all mentioned a sister or a relative or something effect earlier this week or earlier in the show's history, and my sister said she would listen if we referenced her. She's a Steelers fan, so she's going to be very disappointed because the Cardinals are going to just destroy the Steelers. Another fun fact.
What a way to reference your sister there.
Yes. That's what I do.
Chelsea, at least I'm nice to you.
Yeah. Heather, I love you, but your team is not good.
Chelsea, I know you don't care about football.
Yes, I think she only cares about the Steelers and fantasy football. So, but we all remember the Super Bowl game, Cardinals versus the Steelers, in the game Larry Fitzgerald had. Want to know the last time Larry Fitzgerald played in Pittsburgh? When he played at the University of Pittsburgh.
He has not played
He
at
has
the Steelers.
not.
Wow.
Yeah, this will be the first time he is there.
They play once every 4 years.
And
So
the rotation on home and away.
not
And
that often.
So you're listening to Orange Pulp with Nick, Zach, and myself. Nick's filling in for Tim. Now, fantasy football moment. What player do you project going off?
Let me look at my team and so that I don't actually pick anybody that's on this team.
Oh, see, I'm picking someone on my teams.
Because my team is awful.
Nick, what do you got? Do you have anything on the fill-in time?
I'm going to go with a boy from my hometown, Mr. Gronkowski. I think he's going to run rampant over the Colts defense. I think 3 touchdowns. I'm going maybe 160 yards.
My girlfriend would be ecstatic because that's her tight end. My sister would also be ecstatic because that's her tight end, and the Gronk tour would continue. Mine would be Larry Fitzgerald for all the reasons listed above. Dude's just a boss, and Steelers secondary is awful. Zach, have you pondered someone who's not on your team because your team is made of mediocrity?
Well, actually, I am going to go with somebody on my team.
Okay,
I'm going to go with T.Y. Hilton.
Really?
Even though the fact that the Patriots are known for taking away your best option?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, as I said, I'm picking the Colts to win this week, and so I think that they can sort of buck the trend there, and because Andrew Luck and Hilton they have that connection. At least I'm hoping for my sake that's what happens.
And we'll see if Andrew Luck is going to be back. I mean, let's be honest, we've gotten reports that he should be fine for the last 3 weeks, and he hasn't played the last 2.
Well, you know what? Matt Hasselbeck has filled in very nicely, actually having a better season than Andrew Luck is. So let's hope for myself.
An update that just came in on my phone, Alshon Jeffrey is probable right now, having not played since week 1. So for fantasy football owners who probably drafted him pretty high, it's an interesting factor on that. We'll be right back on Orange Pulp with some baseball wraparound in the playoffs, even though when I woke up there was snow on my car. We'll be right back on Orange Pulp. You're listening to Orange Pulp with Nick filling in for Big Time Timmy John, Zach, and myself. MLB baseball, it's playoff time.
It's the championship series time.
Yes, it is. Kansas City is up 2-0 after winning 6-3. What did you make of the game?
Well, when it was decided that this was going to be the ALCS, I loved the matchup. I really wanted it to be Astros in there over the Royals, but you know what? I'll take another small market team like that. But I thought that the Blue Jays were going to have a better showing than this. So far, they're not showing off that power that they have. I still think that the Blue Jays have a chance to pull out this series. I'm still hoping the Blue Jays have a chance to pull out this series. But the pitching for the Royals is so good. It's so strong. With Edison Volquez really coming in to his own in this series. He's going to pitch at least another time. So I'm gonna pick the Blue Jays to win this series, but I think it's going to go to 7 games.
Dig it out of a 2-0 hold.
Hey, they did it last in the ALDS.
They did. Mets Cubs. What do you got, Nick?
Matt Harvey had a big performance. There's been some criticism around him recently, but he had a defining start. I think game 1 of the NLCS. And Daniel Murphy. Is it weird that Daniel Murphy's the best player in baseball right now? I think It's kind of weird. He's doing everything. He's hitting home runs, his 4th of the playoffs. He's stealing bases. He had that great defensive play to end the game last night.
What about that play?
Incredible. I am very excited for this series, a little more than the Royals-Blue Jays series. You got the classic great pitching, great hitting, all the Cubs' young bats, the Mets, that tremendous young pitching staff. I think this will be a long series as well. But the Mets at home field took care of business in Game 1. I think I am, myself as a Red Sox fan, don't have a horse in any of these races. But I think I got to pull. I'm pulling for the Cubs. This could be the year, man. But the Mets look pretty good in Game 1.
Now, Nick being a fill-in guest, we don't get to get the same repertoire and the same access as a normal thing. So we're going to have fun little questions for Nick.
Uh-oh.
And
yeah,
just
Nick,
a couple.
I'd be worried too.
Just a couple. Zach, what is something you want to ask Nick? Could be anything.
Wow, I wasn't prepared to be able to ask a question.
Okay, my question. We know you're a Bills fan.
True.
What's been your favorite sports moment of your life?
Well, they're
It was losing that fourth Super Bowl, wasn't it?
Hey, I was only like 2 years old. They are few and far between in Buffalo, man. But,
Doesn't have to necessarily be with the Bills. It can be anything in general.
I think, going to the only championship thing I've experienced was actually the Buffalo professional lacrosse team, indoor lacrosse. I saw them win the championship there. The lacrosse games in Buffalo are a lot of fun, man. Tickets are real cheap. They're playing music all throughout the game. It's a lot of fun. But unfortunately, I don't get to go to too many of those. And the Bills and Sabres experiences are interesting, to say the least. But, I miss going to the games, even when it's freezing. I think they're getting some flurries back home as well. But, it's a great town for sports. People take it way more seriously than they should, but that's the great thing about it. We don't take anything for granted because we know wins are not easy to come by, and all these, we have a thing about our Boston rivals, all the championships they've won in the last 10 years. Getting a little cocky over there, but what are you gonna do?
Zach,
now,
do you have a question?
Yeah. Now, Nick, so you're another magazine, newspaper, and online person.
I am.
So sort of what's the goal for you?
Well, on our bios on the Newhouse Sports website, I put down my dream job would be to be a featured writer at Grantland.com. Recently, that site's seen an exodus, and it's really kind of going down the tubes. But, any form of sports writing, I'm a big fan of the columnists that kind of are a little more freeform. I'm a Rick Riley fan. I love the stuff that he writes. I was fortunate growing up in Buffalo. The Buffalo News has some tremendous sports writers. They do some great pieces. I don't know if I want to be a reporter. That's not really quite my jam, as it were. But I'm want to get into the writing, but you know what? I've been pleasantly surprised by the experiences I'm getting in the broadcast field. I've never really seen myself as a guy on camera, or in this case, on the airwaves. But you know what? I'm enjoying it, working with some fine folks like you gentlemen here and on Orange Game Day. But I think the pen or keyboard nowadays is where my future lies.
I guess you could take that extra time and use the pen to the paper.
I was going to say, if the pen is mightier than the sword, what's the keyboard? Now, for final thoughts. Who wants to go first? Don't all jump at once.
Well, so Tim sent us something this morning. I'm pulling the article up.
I was
going
to say, I looked at it and went, "That's for someone else to decide."
Yeah, actually, I read the whole thing and I thought it was really interesting.
Okay.
So,
Fowler. Explain to me what I missed.
So it's Fowler High School in Syracuse. Apparently, one of the top soccer teams in the country. And they don't have a home field.
Huh.
Won a state championship in 2012, and last year they were the number 1 ranked team in the state. And they play at let's see, where's the name of the field so I don't mess this up. They play at Burnett Park on a bumpy field. It's not even a flat soccer field. So I don't know if that gives them some sort of an advantage. I was going to say, is that an advantage? But apparently they play a lot of road games.
Well, I can imagine.
Obviously. The football team there, they haven't played a home game since October of 2009.
Wow.
Someone needs to get these teams a sports facility.
So they're going to be building a stadium starting in 2017 because the high school is going through a lot of renovations right now, apparently.
Still a long way away.
Yeah.
17, that's 2 years from now.
Yeah. But, I read this article and I was like, wow, that's a little weird.
Are they breaking ground in 17 or are they...
They're breaking ground
in
17.
It's not even, it's going to be done by 17.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that was Tim's thoughts or Tim's takes.
That's Tim's takes.
Yes, he has 2 different ones and I always butcher the 2 of them together.
Yeah, so that's Tim's takes. So I thought that I'd go through that. I'll let Nick talk while I'm collecting my thoughts.
Nick's notes was Tim's suggestion. Nick's nuggets is another thing I've heard. Which one do you want?
I'll go with Nick's notes. So,
or something you thought of.
Fans of alliteration, you've been waiting all day for it, so there you go. I guess I got to talk about my Bills. E.J. Manuel getting the start today with Tyrod Taylor nursing I think it's an MCL injury. Lots of injuries for the Bills. If they were a little healthier, I might like their chances against the Bengals. I think it'll be closer than some people are thinking it might be. I know the Bengals have looked awfully good this year, but the Bills they still got a real good defense. I think EJ, he's EJ Manuel. He obviously has not lived up to the billing, but I think even with a loss, I'm not going to be too down unless it's a complete embarrassment. AFC's looking a little weak this year. 9-7 is probably going to be good enough to get a wild card spot. So I'm not going to take this game too badly if they lose, but obviously gotta hope for the best.
No bias in that report whatsoever.
None at all.
But hey, that's what your moment's for, so objectivity can be out the window. Zach, what do you got?
I'm actually going to throw this to another high school team, but
Orange Pulp, your leader in high school sports.
But this is kind of a depressing story. Yeah, it's really sad. But it's from Jordan High School in North Carolina. Safety by the name of Brandon Massey on Friday night suffered a broken neck in the game. Went in to make a tackle, got hit really hard, lowered his head, and just apparently a bone cracked in there. He's a 5'10", 172-pound safety and linebacker. It's really sad to hear stuff like that for especially for young players like that who they're just kind of learning the game. It's a really sad story. Apparently he's doing okay now. Had surgery yesterday that worked okay. That was okay. If I can get the words out. His father is
You're just being choked up by the story.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah. His father is a head football coach at Shaw University in North Carolina, a MEAC team. But hope the best for Brandon and hope everything works out. Obviously, football is probably out of the question for him now.
Yeah, it's one of the downside of sports. There are plenty of upsides, but when you see something like that, it's one of those things that's not exactly a great thing to hear, and it's just you hope the best for him and his family. On a different note, my take is, or the BA moment, Batista's bat flip.
There we go.
Joey's bat flip. It's in a different vein entirely, but it's one of those things that bugs me. And it's not the bat flip that bugs me. I love the bat flip. What bugs me is the person who complains about the game being, that's not the way to celebrate. Now, for those who don't know what we're talking about, Batista jacked a home run, just bombed it. 400 feet, home run, playoff game, 3-3 game to make it 6-3, hugely changed the game. And when I hear people complain the bat flip is not the way to celebrate the game, all I hear is, get off my lawn. Because that's what you sound like. Emotion is something that drives this sport. Emotion is something that is part of the game. When I hear Dyson, who gave up the home run at the end of the game, go Popovich saying, you got to respect the game, it bugs me. Hey, if you want to respect the game, don't give up the home run. If you don't want to see the celebration, if you want to respect the game, think back to all the historical moments that have happened of the iconic celebrations. Think of Carlton Fisk waving the ball fair. Think of, I can't believe what I just saw, as Kirk Gibson hit a home run and he's running around the bases just fist pumping. Emotions like that can't be captivated in just words, just sheer emotion. Batista ripped it. And when I hear the expression, act like you've been there before, well, guess what? He hasn't been there before. And the Toronto Blue Jays haven't been there in a very, very long time. Now, for Dyson, if you don't want to give up the home run, if you don't want to hear Shulman going the 1-1 to Batista, drives it deep left field, gone. If you don't want to hear that, don't give up the home run. Now, for the people who say it's not the right way to celebrate, get off my lawn. That's all I have to say. Because the game is emotion. And when I hear it's for the love of the game, well, love is an emotion. And without emotion, there's no love in the game. You're listening to Orange Pulp. Thanks for listening. Tune in next week. We'll be posting it up on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube page, Orange Pulp. Follow us on Twitter at Orange Pulp1. For Zach, Phil, and Nick, great job filling in.
Thank you so much, Nick.
I'm Brian. Have a good one.